This is the Trading Psychology Podcast. This is VP, creator of No Nonsense Forex and author of the book No Nonsense Forex Trading Psychology. And with me, as he is every episode, he spells ambition with an S for some reason. I don't know why, but it's Rob Reinhold.
My ambition is to become a better speller, obviously. I think you could spell it with an S if you wanted to. It's going to be wrong, but you can do it.
You can do anything you set your mind to, and that is a big theme for this week's episode, if it wasn't already obvious. But Rob, this is your Frankenstein. This is your creation. So I don't know. You start off. Do we have to define terms here? I think we typically start by doing that, but I feel like this one's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I don't think we should waste anyone's time. Everyone knows what this is.
So here's what we will do. Let's go ahead and talk about a little bit of an origin story here. Rob, let's go ahead and start with you. I mean, were you just ambitious like you are now since you came out of the womb? Or what is your origin story as it applies to ambition overall?
Wow, I've never done an origin story. This sounds like a villain origin story. Like, how did you get to where you are with, like, you had a good childhood? Just kidding. Okay, the answer is yes. I have always been ambitious. But, when you look back in your early teens, we can't remember really much before our early teens, but our early teens are where we start to be able to collect those memories of what we were like. As a teenager, it's tough to say I had a bunch of ambition. But you know what? I remember, playing sports. I wanted to win. I wanted to win so much. And there's a funny story about one week my parents were out of town, and so my grandma took us to my football game, my Little League football game. And one of the parents on the sideline says, "Can you believe that little deaf boy? He is just so tenacious. He just won't quit." And my grandma's like, "Well, which one are you talking about?" She's like, "That one right there, number 34. She's like, "That's my grandson. He's not deaf." So apparently people thought I was deaf, but I have always had that I don't want to quit attitude, and it definitely got focused. It was all focused on sports when I was a teenager, and it definitely got focused in business when I got a little bit older.
Why did that lady think you were deaf?
I have no idea.
Okay, well, all right, I guess I'll follow it up with mine. Even though I think everybody who listens to this podcast on the regular has already heard this. It's really a combination of other episodes where I talked about it. But if you've either forgotten, or if you're new, or you just simply like to hear it again, I was the smart kid in school. I could read without pausing when I was 5, and I could do times tables and things like that in my head at the same age, and that was the one thing I was good at. And I did not excel at anything else, literally. It was just that one thing. And so that I felt was my calling. And I think it's inherent in males to be competitive and to be ambitious. I know for some people it's not. I have a feeling lifestyle and substances do play a part in that. But I think at our core, at the genetic level, we are naturally ambitious. So that's just what I rode for the rest of my life. I wanted to become validated, and we had an episode on validation, for what I knew, because I got so much of that as a kid. But then as I grew, I didn't think I needed to study for anything, and then ADD really started to kick in, and I couldn't focus, and I lost interest very easily. And all that validation I was getting as a kid was slowly going away. And so I'm over here, I'm like, no, really, I'm still smart. Please recognize me for this. And so as I got older and started getting into the workplace, I wanted my job to include that validation. And so ambition was not a problem, but I was always in these jobs, i.e. waiting tables, to where I would look around and say, I am so much better than this. I am destined for so much better things. When truth be told, most people, barring something very unlucky or very unfortunate, are exactly where they should be in life. And at that particular restaurant that I was at the time where I was thinking that particular thing, is exactly where I was supposed to be. And I didn't realize that. I always thought I was capable of so much more, even though I really wasn't doing a whole lot about it. So I decided, I really started to like wine and spirits. and and how they were made, what made one distinct from another. And so I had that passion, and I was like, well, yeah, let's get really good at this. And so I learned a lot, and I became very smart at those things. I'm like, all right, well, now it's time to turn it into something. So that was my ambition in my mid-20s early on, was to be a sommelier at a big restaurant. And so that is what took me to Las Vegas. Quickly found that was not the route I should be taking. And just started waiting tables and did that as I built my passions elsewhere. But ambition for me, never really a problem. Execution was at times, and I think we probably need to touch on that, because I think anybody who listens to this is plenty ambitious. It's really just the execution that they have an issue with. But I mean, I always had a bigger plan, because I always felt like I was destined for bigger and better things because of all of the programming I got early on as a kid, with everybody walking up to me and telling me how smart I was. And so from start to finish, for me, I've always been crazy ambitious. I still am. I still want to do more, and that just keeps me motivated. I think it's a wonderful thing. I don't see what the problem is, but I have a feeling, Rob, we're going to run into those problems at some point in this episode, aren't we?
Well, we're going to discuss them, but I'm going to talk about real-world situations in my life and other traders' lives where I really want to give some insight into how this can be very detrimental. When I got into trading in my early 20s, I was on fire. I loved it, and I was so into it. I had so much ambition. And, in my early 20s, I wanted to be the next Bill Gates. I'm going to talk about Bill Gates later when I found out something else. But I just wanted to win. I wanted to win in the game of capitalism, in the game of life. And I did some real estate flipping. I mean, I was young, I was vibrant, I would work all day and all night if I possibly could. I had so much ambition. And when I came to trading, it just was like, oh my gosh, this is it. And I poured every single part of me into that. Now, let's talk quickly about the pros. We don't need to go over the pros for all that much time, because that's not going to help anyone. Before we get to the cons, that ambition gave me drive. Drive is where I was not a morning person prior to trading. Where I live, the stock market opens up at 7:30. When I started trading at Maverick Trading, I had to drive about 45 minutes down to the office, and I wanted to get there about 45 minutes before the market opened so I could do some research. So that meant I had to start waking up at 6. I was not a morning person until trading. And it became easy to wake up, get my ass in the car, make that drive, go down because of my ambition. So it gave me this focus. It gave me this work ethic to where I couldn't spend enough time doing it. Dedication, meaning it didn't matter how tough it got, I was going to grind it out. I was going to do it. And I had passion. These are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things in almost every single profession, but there's some definite negatives when it comes to ambition. Patrick, do you want to add anything on the pros?
I do want to add one thing, because there are different levels of ambition for everybody, right? But I don't feel like that excuses you, especially, and I'm just going to say, especially as a man. I know people who, their passion, I guess their ambition is to sit around and play video games and smoke weed and eat terrible food all day. And that's just what makes them happy. That's what drives them when they wake up in the morning. I would counter that with, you can still do those things if you really love to do those things, but that can be a small part of your day. The rest of it needs to be, building something and protecting yourself from an uncertain future. Because the one thing I really want to add there, Rob, is a healthy fear. A healthy fear that, if what I just described is your life and your ambition, that can go south in a hurry in many, many ways. Some ways that you probably just don't even realize yet. And one of the things I try to do in my other podcast, my investing podcast, is people are at least ambitious enough to listen to the podcast, but that's not really saying much. I have a feeling the majority of people who listen to what I'm saying really aren't taking action, and they pretend to have ambition, but when it comes time for the rubber to hit the road and for them to actually invest in something and protect themselves financially, their real level of ambition comes to the surface, let's just say. So I think fear should be included in there. And I want to know what you think about that. But when I say fear can be many things. Fear of not protecting yourself from an uncertain future, fear of wasted talent could be a big one, fear of regret if you don't try to apply yourself at least early on just to see, what could happen. What could happen if I max out my stats and max out my skills and really put my mind to something? What could happen? I don't want to be 40, 50, 60 years old and then wonder what might have been. I certainly don't want to be on my deathbed and wonder what might have been. So that's the one I would add. Let me know if you think that's a good one or if you feel that's relevant to this episode, because that's the one thing that was kind of going through my head when I thought about it.
I think that, what you just really went about or described, it was regret. And I think regret is absolutely a part of ambition. When you get to this future place, how do you want to look back on yourself? And I think that is part of ambition. For me, my self-esteem, how I see myself is so important. Like, I am generous with money. I'm generous with time. I try to do things. And yes, I do like helping people and I do love the effects. But in the end, and I think we've talked about this in a prior podcast, I do it for me because I want to look in the mirror and be like, hey, that guy's generous. That guy's hardworking. That guy's all these things. And I did it. Yes, I love helping other people, but in the end, I did it for me. So yes, I think that regret, that once you are 10 years older, 20 years older, how are you going to look back on yourself today? And are you going to be proud of what you saw? I think that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I can't remember the saying, but it's the people who are the hardest on themselves are the people who generally do better in life. And when I heard that, that was very validating for me because I'm extremely hard on myself. I feel like I've done a lot of the things that I want to do. I've become financially free. I've helped a lot of people. I'm in good shape for my age, but I still look in the mirror every day. And every once in a while, I'm just like, ugh, you piece of shit. There's so much more you could be doing right now. Look at you. So yeah, that ambition, especially when you get a really good momentum behind it too, it just carries. And it's never, ever a bad thing, in my opinion. And I think that segues really, really well into the cons because according to Rob Reinhold, there are cons to this ambition. And so we need to point them out and we need to be very specific about them because personally, I don't see a lot of downsides to it.
A lot of the episodes we've done have been about these emotions and how they're good and they're bad. We just did one on anger and we talked about, hey, anger is really a good thing if harnessed in the right way. Ambition is the same way. I'm going to be sharing a lot of my personal experiences and they may not apply exactly to you. And hopefully, Patrick, you'll be able to share some experiences that might apply to people. But here's the problem with ambition. And again, my ambition was huge. I was not patient and it led to a get rich quick. Now, if you asked me at the time, Rob, do you think you're going to get rich quick? Of course not. Of course I'm not going to get rich quick. This is going to take years to do. But if you were to get in my thoughts, in my brain, it was just around the corner. It was literally this weekend. That's how close it was. And so that desire, that passion, that ambition really made me really fall into get rich quick. Like, hey, I need to just strike big. I need to over leverage. I need to over position size. I need to do more. I need to trade bigger because I had that ambition to get to these goals and I wanted it to happen now. So I think that's probably one of the biggest problems with ambition is it really leads you to this get rich quick. And I know that that's so gimmicky. That sounds gimmicky, but let's talk about get rich quick. Let's put some actual years on this. Patrick, if I said I'm going to get rich quick, I'm going to get rich quick in the next 10 years. Do you consider that a get rich quick scheme?
10 years, no. I think that's reasonable. Maybe, honestly, 10 years, not totally realistic because you have to make all your mistakes first. And how many years is that going to take before you finally get yourself into that zone to where you can really start making money without screwing up all the time? But yeah, that's such a tough question.
What about 5 years?
Too soon. Yeah, I think this happens a lot with people in their 20s. And by the way, I'm glad you did bring this up. I'm totally wrong. There are drawbacks to being overly ambitious here. Lottery players, I'm sure, are super ambitious people, but they're just going about the wrong way because they want it too quick, just like you're saying. This is a big thing with people in their 20s. They see videos of these absolute outliers that made a bunch of money doing whatever. It was so big during the crypto booms, and will come back again. And they're like, that's what I want to be. What's the point of being rich if I can't be rich in my 20s and be able to, to spend it on all these things? Okay, if you want to be that 1 in 7 million that does that, okay, that's great. That's a lot of ambition, just not a lot of common sense. Listen to anybody who's actually done this for a sustained amount of time, on the low, medium, and high levels. They will all tell you the same thing. It takes time, and you have to be okay with that. And the problem is, in the field we're in, Rob, trading, people just don't see it that way because all of the programming they get from the media outlets tells them otherwise. Tells them that they're going to get there. They're going to get to where they want to be a lot quicker than they actually are. That's a problem.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. It's just you're going to fall into the get rich quick with a lot of ambition. It's just going to happen. And even though you don't think, oh, I'm going to try to get rich quick, you're still expecting it to happen within a couple years or a couple months. When I was in my 20s, it was definitely a couple months is what it was going to take. I'll talk about that a little bit later because I really want to hammer this point home. But let's get into the next bullet point I have of overwork. So we talked about the pros of work ethic. Here we have overwork. I would have worked 24/7 if I could. And I've told my wife this many times. When we were dating and we were getting serious, and maybe we were even engaged at the time, we talked about potential problems we see in our marriage. And I said to her, oh, I'm worried I'm going to be a workaholic. And she kind of looked at me. Now, look, I was young. I wasn't a workaholic at the time, but now she sees it. I love to work. But I have to say this, the saving grace for me for having a family was when it got to 5 p.m., I would shut down my system. Even though I didn't want to, even though I wanted to keep going, I shut down my system because I needed to do family time. That has saved me from really being an overwork. We talked in the first episode or two about the Yerkes-Dodson law. The Yerkes-Dodson law says that whenever you're trying to accomplish a task, if it's too easy, you get bored, you don't really put your full mind into it. If it's too difficult, then you have all these negative consequences. You want it to be difficult, but not impossible to get the best results. And there's a whole book called Flow about this that really talks about getting in this point. We made a joke and we talked about making t-shirts that said trade harder. Do you remember that, Patrick?
Oh, yeah. We love to bring it up, and we need to actually do that at some point.
So, again, you can't trade harder. You can't do anything harder. It is what it is, and it's just going to take time. So, what happens is you get this sunk cost of, I've been working 8 hours a day on trading for 2 years. I should have more than I have. Well, guess what? Only an hour of that 8 hours was even productive. You haven't really been working all that much. You've just been spinning your wheels doing dumb stuff. That's one of the problems with ambition is you are going to spend lots of time doing really things that aren't going to add any value to your bottom line.
Yeah, like consuming content. First of all, thank you for listening to this podcast, but That's what so many people do. They just think by osmosis. The more they absorb, the better they're going to be with that execution. Meanwhile, people who are barely consuming any content are out there running circles around you. You have to understand that balance. But I want to go back to what you said real quick, Rob, because it's funny. And again, dedicated podcast listeners know my story here. But I figured I had, back when I was first starting trading, I had about 18 hours waking hours in the day. By golly, I was going to use them. I didn't have the family thing to put the brakes on. I was single and by myself. I had all the time in the world, and I used it. I would get ready for work at about 2:30 in the afternoon. I would go into work at 4, wait tables, and then come back a little before midnight, eat, get myself ready to trade the London session, and then trade Forex until about 6 in the morning. Go to bed with an incredible amount of anxiety, and then wake up around 1:30 so I could get ready for the next day, and just repeat that over and over again. And did it work? Absolutely not. It did the exact opposite of what it was expected to do. My trading was terrible. I was frustrated. I never thought I would get anywhere, and I would look in the mirror and my face was changing in a bad way. My body looked terrible. Like everything was just a complete net negative, because I had become so ambitious to get out of the industry I was in that I overworked myself to death. I was not being intelligent about it, and I had to become intelligent about it. But that was good, because I was able to share that, makeover, and share those changes I made with the rest of the world, and that ended up helping them too. But I had to go through that period of absolute overwork, burnout, physical, mental, emotional stress before I had that come to Jesus moment where I was like, okay, life cannot be like this. This is not ever going to work. I don't care what the prize is at the end of the rainbow. This is not what I signed up for. This is not what anybody signed up for. Yet for some reason, I figure, I should be putting my ambition to work, and this is the way I should be doing it. But there is a smart way and a dumb way to approach just about anything, but especially something like this.
Patrick, this reminds me of an analogy that a trader just gave me last month, and I loved it. And he was talking about being patient. He's like, I'm working on being patient because when a lion or a tiger hunts, they're not out there hunting all day long because they get exhausted and they've got to be ready to pounce. They have to expend this short burst of energy that is very intense for that moment. And then they go back to sleeping or sitting 22, maybe 23 hours a day and sleeping. And he talked about how in Forex, how the market's moving, but he doesn't want to waste his energy. He's saving up his energy for when the moment comes, he can truly pounce and truly get there and get in and make his trade and get out. And then he goes back to that resting phase. I love that analogy, and I want everyone to think about themselves as that lion, as that tiger, that, hey, you can't be out there running around all day long. You've got to rest. You've got to conserve energy. You've got to get ready for that burst of activity and that flurry. I just think it's a great analogy to really help out this whole thing of ambition, of thinking, I need to be hunting all the time. Save up your energy.
I would say it's a pretty good analogy. I mean, there is a lot of work you have to do to get yourself to that point. Don't ignore that, at least. I don't want people, I don't think they will, but I don't want anybody hearing that and thinking, oh, I just got to work, a very short amount of time per day and then I'm done. No, there's a lot that goes into it. But yes.
Well, let me clarify that. It's the trading portion should be like that. It should be like the hunter. The training, education, and stuff. Yeah, that's spend 7 hours a day back testing. I don't care. I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I have to add it because I'm here and it's what I do. But if you trade the no-nonsense Forex way of trading, this will absolutely happen. And even better, you will know exactly when that gazelle or wildebeest is going to cross your path because it's the exact same time every trading day.
All right, let's move on to the next one. And this is the one that I really want to get across to you. So I know you've been sort of listening, sort of not, just kidding. But this one I really want you to pay attention to. short-sightedness. This is one of the problems, and this really ties in with the get rich quick, is that I was truly unable in my early 20s, and I don't think anyone is able, I just don't think it's possible, to where you really see a life for what it truly is. Now I'm in my 50s, and I remember hearing people say, oh, I would never go back to being a teenager. When I was a teenager, I thought, these old people suck, because being a teenager is so much fun. And now that I'm older, I have to say I would never go back to my teenage years, because you get it, you understand it. And so in my 20s, my ambition led me to shoot myself in the foot a lot of times. It caused me to, again, push too hard and overtrade and sometimes overposition size. And it just caused, I slowed down my process in my early 20s for sure with my ambition, for sure, because I wanted it too much too fast. And I remember a moment where I looked at my results. Again, I had good results, but remember, I wanted to be Bill Gates. I wanted to be Bill Gates. I wanted to have hundreds of millions of dollars by the time I was in my 30s. I looked at my results and I said, I guess that's not going to happen. And I remember my dream died at that moment. And I remember telling myself, I guess I'm just going to have to work my whole life to become wealthy. And from that moment on, I just put my head down and just day after day after day after day, I just worked and followed my system, did my thing, built new systems, tested it, did my thing. And I remember about, let's call it 5 years later, I actually stopped, looked around, and said, holy shit, I think I made it. But that's all I did. And then I put my head back down and kept working. That is what age and wisdom brings. And I wish that I could just give that to you if you're young. I wish I could just show you, go into a compounding interest calculator and just see what 25% a year will do for your life. It's amazing. But if you push too hard and you can't get that 25%, it doesn't mean anything. So the one thing I really want you to take away from this is that it's not going to happen for you in the next couple of years. It's just not. And guess what? If it does, great job. I'm going to pat you on the back, but don't set yourself up for that trap. I need you to just realize you're just going to have to do this for your entire life. And I don't mean just this as in trading. I mean this as your other responsibilities. This is your other stresses in life. This is your other thing. It's just how life is. And the sooner you can kill off that delusion of grandeur that you're going to be the next Bill Gates or you're going to be the next Warren Buffett or Elon Musk, the earlier you can kill that and just realize, hey, I just want to have a good life, it's going to help you out so much. Just put your head down, keep working, keep growing. One day you'll look up and say, holy shit, hey, I think I did something here. And then you're going to say, I don't care, I'm going to keep going. That's what I really want you to take from this podcast.
Yeah, and I'll throw in a takeaway too, and I'm really hesitant to do this because this idea is on the spreadsheet. Maybe this should just be the next episode you and I do, Rob, and just kind of continue off of what we've been talking about. But here's, it's an absurd idea to somebody with a ton of ambition in their 20s because this is not what they want. But it doesn't matter. This is what it has to be. Every day I wake up, I'm not doing anything for myself for the right now. I am either doing something for myself either 1 year ahead or, as is more often the case, 5 years ahead. And I've had this conversation with friends, and they're like, well, yeah, Patrick, that's your problem, is you're not doing anything for the now. You're always doing things for the future. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. But you also know what? One day that future comes. And I am super, super happy that my 5 years ago self had the foresight to do things for me in the future. Because man, is it paying off nicely. And so again, when you're all geeked out on ambition and you're young and you want things now, this is not the way to look at it. But man, oh man, if you can just start putting down the pieces in place right now and just play the setup game instead of the instant gratification game, oh buddy, it gets really, really good when that time comes. I can't explain it to you. It won't make sense to a lot of you, but I can't think of a better way to explain it, and I can't think of a better process because it just keeps on paying off over and over again. And then once it finally does, you're still in that process of doing things for yourself 1 to 5 years down the road. And so it's almost like Christmas every year. Something you did in the past will be paying for itself for you every year of your existence. And it's fantastic. It's like just getting paid for really smart things your previous self did. So if that sounds good to you, use your ambition for things like that. Not for what's going to happen to you today, but for what will happen to you in the future. Because like with Rob said, I used to fear older age until I got there, and then I found out how awesome it can be. But the only reason it's awesome is because I did things for the mid-40s version of VP when I was in my 20s, when I was in my 30s, and when I was in my early 40s.
One of the things I always used to tell my kids was where you are today is a result of what you did yesterday. Where you'll be tomorrow is a result of what you did today. I have about 5 nephews, and I've all sat down with them and talked to them when they were 19, 20 years old. This is the advice I gave them all. Figure out what you want to do in your life as fast as possible. Figure it out in your early 20s. Then you need to spend 5 years throwing everything you have at it, becoming an expert with no expectations that you're going to make any money doing it. But after those 5 years, when you then get into your 30s and you've got 7 or 8 years of really good experience and really 7 or 8 years of really just eating up every single bit of expertise you can, then you're going to be able to go out in the marketplace and you're going to make a lot of money for the rest of your life. That's the advice I give all young people now is figure out what you want to do as early as possible. Spend 5 years working at it with no expectations of making any money. Or if it's a job, if it's a career, you're going to make the lowest amount of money that someone could possibly make. That's not your goal. Your goal is to build the skills to be able to pay off in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. I didn't understand that. So play the long game. One of the ways that I found out how to play the long game was instead of just looking at my trading account, I started looking at all my net worth, all the other things that I was doing at the time. And I thought, oh, okay, let me focus on my net worth, not hyper-focus on my trading. That helped me so much to where now, yes, I had all this ambition, I had all this energy, but it wasn't hyper fixated on my trading. It was hyper fixated on growing net worth. Patrick, what do you think about that?
I don't know how I feel about that because I think we all start at a place to where our net worth is really small. And it's like, well, how do I even get off of zero? There's other things that you have to put in place just to simply get off of zero. And the big question is, how many years does that take? It might take 3 to 5 years just simply to do that. So I know exactly what you're saying. And at this point in my life, I agree with it. But I just, if I'm giving advice to somebody who's younger and has a net worth of either zero or in the negative, how do you square that circle?
Well, I think the way you square it is by setting achievable, measurable, and obtainable goals. So let's say there's someone who's 21 years old. Let's say they're at zero, or let's say they're even at negative $2,000 in credit card debt. Okay, so the first goal is, hey, I need to obviously, there's 2 components of cash flow. There's income and there's expenses. You can change both. So if you're looking at this saying, okay, well, my rent is $1,500. This is this, and my job pays me $2,500 a month. Well, guess what? If there's nothing left at the end of the month, then you can't do anything with the math. So you've got to change those. You've got to change those numbers. You either have to decrease expenses or you have to increase your income. Or why don't you just do both? things like, hey, I'm going to move back in with my parents, save this $1,500, and I'm going to pay off my credit card debt and save up that rent that I would have been spending. Then I can go out and get started with X. Again, it's setting these little goals. I know we all want to be that Warren Buffett or Bill Gates. Maybe you don't. But guess what? They got there just one step at a time as well. They had to take all the steps. So make sure that those goals are just, as long as you're growing, and let's say that you have a goal to grow your net worth by 10% a year. Okay, so the first year you're at $100, next year at $200. Hey, good job. You doubled your net worth. And then you go on from there and there. So that's what I'm talking about, playing the long game. Playing the long game and just taking step after step.
And I like that you brought that up, because so many people, especially if they're young, or, and I'll say this too, especially if they're from a very poor country and they themselves are in a bad situation, they tend to think that once they find trading, that they will be able to trade their way out of this bad situation. And maybe that's the case, but it's going to take a long time, especially for them, because they have so many negatives in their life, so many things in the minus column that have to get fixed first. So I tell people, look, study and learn trading, and you probably shouldn't be putting any actual real money towards it for a while until you work on those negatives. That should be your main focus. So maybe don't get all starry-eyed with the upside until you at least shave off some of that downside first, because that's just, it's almost trying to like winning a race with, a 50-pound backpack on. You're not going to be able to do that. You have to lighten that load somehow. And I guess people don't think that that's really exciting to focus on reducing negatives, but I think that's tremendously exciting, because that's just less money I'll have to waste in the future, and that can go from the debit column to the credit column. So yes, be excited about trading. Focus your energy on learning the game and getting good at it. But when it comes to actual money, which is probably why you got into this game in the first place, do what you can now to drop a lot of that negative weight, because again, like we talked about before, that is going to do nothing but set you up for success in the future, 1, 3, 5 years down the road.
That's really the message that we want to leave you, is just grow. It's just growth. It's just growth over your whole life, and just focus on each little step. Focus on putting one foot in front of the other. One of my favorite sayings is, the only difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is when they fall forward. So when they get up, they've gone somewhere. So just keep moving. And to wrap this whole thing up, I want to finish out my Bill Gates story. It was somewhere in my late 20s. Bill Gates was on a talk show, and they asked him, is it true that over the past 20 years, you've only taken off 3 days of work, including weekends and holidays? And he said, yes, that is true. And I remember watching that, and I remember having this ambition, and I remember thinking, F that. I don't want any part of that. And now when I look at these Elon Musk, these Jeff Bezoses, I don't want to be them anymore. I don't want to be them at all. That looks fairly miserable. If you've watched the show The Crown, The Crown, where the royalty of England, how wealthy they are. I want none of that. I want zero of that anymore. I just want to have a good life with enough money. I want to do some travel, take care of my family. That's it. That ambition was tamed when I really saw what it took to get there. And it really helped me focus on my true goal of just, I want to be happy. I want to have enough money to do things. And that's it. So I wanted to leave that story at the end with you, just to show you, you know what? You don't need to be Bill Gates. You don't have to be Elon Musk. You don't have to be the greatest trader in the world. Just get better day after day.
Yeah, and that's, Scott, I know we're towards the end of the show, but that goes in such a different direction as far as, what it takes to be a 6-figure guy, to a 7-figure guy, to an 8-figure guy. And the moral of that story is, the higher up you go, the more you're going to have to sacrifice on the other end. And some people just aren't built for that. But everybody has varying levels of ambition. I would bet you listening to this podcast right now, you do have a lot of it. And I hope the main takeaway from what you got from this episode is it's great and it's essential, but it just has to go to the right places. And there has to be an understanding before you start deciding where that ambition is going to go. And I think if you can do that, you are well on your way. But when I say well on your way, it's going to take a while. So just know that. So if we can leave you at that, thank you everybody for joining us here on the Trading Psychology Podcast. Rob and I will both see you in the next episode.
Goodbye.